Meanwhile, this morning, getting a look at what may be required for state workers to get a religious exemption for the COVID-19 vaccine.
Q13's Brandy Cruz broke this story last night. Joining us now this morning, you teased ahead that you have something special to show us.
Yeah, just some, what I want to do is get really into the details on this. I know that sometimes it can be a lot to take away, but this is such an important subject when it comes to who is going to be entitled to a religious exemption and who is not going to be entitled to one. And I'll tell you what, we have just found some really interesting information over the last 24 hours. There's this question about, okay, what will forms look like in order to request a religious exemption? And two state workers from two different state agencies sent me the forms they were given, one from the State Department of Transportation, one from the Department of Social and Health Services. And both of the forms sent yesterday look very, very similar, and they have the two of the same questions on them, and the questions are quite interesting. The first one, pretty straightforward. You assert that you have a sincerely held religious belief or religious conviction that prevents you from receiving the COVID-19 vaccine. You're asked to check yes or no. Okay, that sounds straightforward. It's the second question that is definitely raising some eyebrows. You affirm or agree that you have never received a vaccine or medicine from a healthcare provider as an adult. So these forms, again, given to employees with state agencies, ask them to assert that they have never not only received a vaccine, but any medicine from a doctor as an adult. And so we've reached out to the governor's office to ask them about that. Certainly there are people who can come into religion later in life. Maybe you were in your 20s and you were getting vaccines, but then you became a religious person and now you believe you're exempt. How would the state handle that? And then also, why are they tying medicine and vaccines together? If somebody gets a topical ointment at some point, does that preclude them from seeking a religious exemption to the vaccine? Now, not all folks who are currently under a vaccine mandate are using the same forms for religious exemption. I want to play for you. Remember last week we had on State Superintendent Chris Reichdahl and caused some waves with this interview where the superintendent of public schools basically said, look, it's going to be pretty easy for folks to claim a religious exemption. Watch.
There are no forces out there that are going to force people to go document the church they belong to or get a signature from a member of the clergy or their synagogue or their mosque. There's no role for us in that.
There are no forces out there that are going to require people to get a signature from their clergy, for example. That's what he said. Now, OSPI might not be requiring that its employees get a signature from a clergy, but there are places that are requiring that. Take a look at this. It's from the Capital Region Educational Services District 113. I'll go in closer on this in a moment, but this is a form currently on their website for employees there to seek a religious exemption. Now, the second part of this form is specifically for religious leaders. You actually have to bring the form. Let's pull up this full screen here. You actually have to bring the form to your religious leader and have them basically attest to the sincerity of your faith. The form reads, for religious leader, in the space below, please provide a written and signed statement supporting the basis of the observance faith, which are contrary to the practice of vaccination or use of the COVID-19 vaccine. So here's an example of a place of employment, the Educational Services District down in the Olympia area, that not only do you have to attest to the sincerity of your faith, but you have to then have your religious leader attest to the same thing and sign on the dotted line, very contrary to what the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction told us. So you're seeing these sort of varying forms out there in ways that workplaces are deciding whether you are entitled to a religious exemption or not. And I would also, when we talk about, kind of poking holes in some of these things, it's not our opinion on whether you should get a vaccine, whether there should be religious exemptions. It's just important to sort of take a fine look at what government is doing. And, when you talk about getting or needing a signature from a religious leader, what if somebody is religious, but they don't attend a church or they don't go to a mosque and they sort of practice their religion in their own space? What if they don't have a religious leader to sign off on a form? So a lot of interesting layers to this requirement.
Yeah, so many interesting. And I'm sure it's not the last form we'll see that will be different, potentially.
Yeah, and we've reached out to the governor's office, especially as it pertained to those first two forms we showed you with the, have you taken any medicine from a doctor, to ask, will this be the final version of the form? And how is that enforced and what kind of exceptions might you give to folks?